A decade ago, politicians ran against LGBT rights. Today, they're running towards them. Right? Because they've learned what the rest of the country knows, that marriage equality is about our civil rights and our firm belief that every citizen should be treated equally under the law.
The Republican Party finds themselves at yet another crossroads. Months before the presidential election, the Supreme Court passes same-sex marriage as law of the land, and numerous polls show this is what America wants. Add to that the immigration battle and words from Donald Trump. Should the GOP be making as much distance as possible between themselves and the Donald, or maybe cozy up to the comments? Open the gates. Let loose the political animal. Ron Christie is the former Deputy Assistant to Vice President Dick Cheney, Daily Beast contributor and CEO of Christie Strategies, joined by Jim Antle, political editor at the Washington Examiner and author of Devouring Freedom. Gentlemen, pleasure to have you both on the show. Thanks for joining us. And Ron, I'm going to go ahead and begin with you. After what the president said, and SCOTUS now going for same-sex marriage, simple question. Is it time for Republicans everywhere to put up their hands, surrender on gay marriage, and understand that they have to go along with the tide?
Well, no, it's nice to join you as always, Ed. I think this is a very important issue. I think the Supreme Court never should have taken this case. I think that our equal protection under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution ensures that all Americans are afforded the same basic respect and dignity that Justice Kennedy tried to find in this opinion. Now, I am not going to walk away and say that those who have a strong religious conviction who are against gay marriage, they are entitled to their opinion, they're entitled to their beliefs. I frankly think anybody who wants to jump in the pool of marriage, Ed, and they want to get involved and let the other person suddenly take charge, let them. But as a political issue, I think the Republicans need to recognize that while this might be a politically popular move by some of the progressives, it is okay to say, I believe in traditional marriage without thinking they're going to get in trouble.
Jim, I think maybe that's a good point here, because while maybe not surrendering, there are those who say that perhaps the GOP just needs to be smarter in fighting this battle and so many others. Would you agree to that?
Well, I think in terms of are you going to actually be able to change the policy, the combination of there being a Supreme Court ruling and the polls shifting in such a way that it would be very difficult to get anything like a constitutional amendment or anything that could theoretically reverse the decision passed because there isn't that same level of political support. I don't think there's much they can do to change the policy of same-sex marriage, but I do think that this issue is going to move to be more of a battle over religious liberty. And if Republicans are smart, which is not always something that you can guarantee, they can turn this issue into something where they might be able to get some political benefits from it.
I think you possibly just said it best when it comes down to smart. And Ron, I saw you shaking your head there when I was asking the question, and you even laughed in the background. That's really what this all comes down to, isn't it, though, Ron, is intelligence, smartness. If you're going to stand on an issue, you've got to be smart when you present it. And thus far, if you look, the Republicans, by and large, have not been very smart in a lot of things they've said and done.
No, particularly not in these social issues. And, I often cringe when you hear some of the Republican candidates out, not only at the presidential level, but those who are seeking re-election in the House and the Senate, of some of the things they say. I mean, this is just basic common sense. We need to treat people with dignity. We need to treat people with respect. But you shouldn't have to run away from your core beliefs and your core principles. And, these guys are the same people who don't seem to recognize that just a few years ago, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, they all believed in what traditional marriage was, and that these Republicans seem to be tripping all over themselves. And I just wish that a lot of these candidates would take a stand, explain their position to their constituents, and then move on.
Jim, let me get to you now on beliefs and practices here, or principles at least, and let me turn to something else. Let's go to the Donald, if we can here. Donald Trump makes his statements. He is topping the news right now. He's loving every second of it. But what's really catches everybody here is the GOP, the leadership is just being so quiet on this. They really haven't said much, and you got a lot of candidates who are not saying anything. Some people have even said that maybe it's shameful silence on Trump. What do you think?
Well, I think there are going to be different candidates who will be speaking out at different points. At the moment, I think if you're Jeb Bush, you might use some of Trump's comments as a teachable moment about what not to do in trying to reach out to Hispanics. You might put some distance between yourself and Trump at some point. But I think if I'm Jeb Bush, I kind of like Donald Trump's rise because it's coming at the expense of other conservatives who would be more viable both in the primaries and in the general election. And I think a Bush versus Trump battle is one that Bush is pretty well set up to win.
Ron, should the GOP call out Donald Trump for bigotry?
I don't know. I just wouldn't pay this guy that much attention. I mean, I know he's number 2 in a lot of the polls that you see out this past week. I don't really associate myself with his comments. I think they were somewhat mean-spirited and somewhat bigoted. But I wouldn't give him the time of day, because if you bring up Donald Trump and Donald Trump's comments, that means you're talking about Donald Trump. And sometimes I think discretion is the better part of valor, Ed. And if I were a Republican presidential candidate who was running or advising one, I'd say I'd stick to my core themes, my core issues, what I think I'm going to do to bring the country forward, as opposed to Trump's divisive, which I think clown car sideshow candidacy has become.
There's that smart stuff all over again. All right, last thing, 20 seconds to you, Jim. Scott Walker says he's finally going to get into the race. Too little, too late, and my goodness, can anybody else get in?
No, I mean, I think this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. I think John Kasich could potentially get in after Scott Walker, but Walker has definitely slipped a bit in that conservative share of the vote, and I think he's going to need to do a lot better to reclaim the position he had a little bit earlier this year.
Ron, did he wait too long?
I think he waited too long. I think Scott Walker's going to get in, and absolutely my former boss, John Kasich, looks like he's going to get in on July 21st. The question is, will these folks have the money, the organization, and the ability to really generate momentum when so many other folks like Jeb Bush and Rubio and the rest have had months and months of time to raise money and to get that momentum and that organization in place?
And just to point out, in case anybody is asking, Ron, Jim, and myself, we are not running for the Republican nomination. We just thought we'd make that clear. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great 4th of July to you and your families. We'll talk to you again. All right, take care. When we come back, cold, hard truth about Christie and his POTUS chances.